Well, welcome everybody. This is John Paul Dutch Talk Speed Selling. This is the Raging Verbalist number 171. Quick announcement. Unfortunately, because of I think we that she has COVID, the ever lovely Sandra will not be joining us today, but the show must go on. So, what are we going to talk about today? How are we going to do this, and what are we going to cover? Well, this is a session that, in some ways, is 50 years in the making because this is the 50th anniversary of me either being in business, running a business, being part of a business. This is about the best approximation that I have. So 50 years ago, 1973, around March timeframe, I dove in and said, hey, you know what I need to do? I need to probably start a business. That isn't really quite how it happened, but you're going to find that out in just a moment. So get ready for that. By the way, if you want to get in touch with us, you can do that through couple means. First off, obviously, join the YouTube channel, hit a like, a notification if you want to be annoyed. Also, you can go to the Facebook group, which is Position to Win Book, Position to Win Book, and ask questions, put some things in there. Also, you can go to the website, positiontowinbook.com, positiontowinbook.com, and you can buy things. Also, you can find out about stuff we have, some pretty cool free stuff, and kind of go from there. All right, so let's get down to the story. Let's talk about the origin of this whole thing and what it was like starting a business and what I was doing and how that took place. So first off, there was a revelation, and that revelation was that I was actually at a supermarket, and I can, in my mind, and if, hopefully your memory works as well as mine or better, but I can remember the exact moment where I was standing, and that is I was in the checkout line with my friend, and this revelation, this bolt of lightning hit me that to be in business, this moment of discovery, to be in business means you make a decision and say, I'm going to be in business. And I went, it has to be something more than that. But truly, that's what it takes is that bolt. I would call it a bolt of lightning. It really wasn't a bolt of lightning, but I just said to myself, I'm going to be in business. He thought I was probably half joking. He became my partner. We'll talk more about that later, but that was how that whole thing kicked off. The supermarket chain is now long gone. Had a terrible name. It was called Dell Farm, but it was the closest one to our house. My mother didn't drive, so we would walk over. Always fun, get to walk over, buy groceries, and bring them on home. So that was the origin point. That was, if you will, that meteorite hurling through space collided with my noggin and said, okay, you're going to be in business. Now, let's talk about the hurdles, the barriers, and some of the things I ran into. First off, I was a voracious reader at that point in time, still a voracious reader. And what I couldn't find is that none of the books that I could find in the library hit the mark. I would sit there and go, okay, there's got to be a book that says, this is what you have to do. This is what takes place. And they were either college textbook type books, which talk about big businesses and talk about things. It's all there. It's just you got to dissemble that. And a lot of times it doesn't apply to small businesses. Then I found books about small businesses, and many of them were just wild ass. I don't know where these guys were coming from. And later on, I would realize that they were just in the book business to sell books, not necessarily to get people into business, because it turns out the idea of being in business is much cooler than actually being in business for most people. There's this kind of romance section of that thing. So the books didn't really hit the mark. I asked a lot of librarians and talked to people who didn't necessarily know, but I kind of worked my way through and trying to figure out what I was going to do. My father suggested, he wasn't in business at this point in time, though he owned rental property, is that I go to the Small Business Administration. Hey, the government knows this stuff. Why don't you go check those guys out? Well, that turned out to be a really interesting, point in time. So you go to talk to somebody in the government, a bureaucrat or something like that. Now, their charter is to help people get into business. And they have lots and lots of free information. So I just kind of, scooped everything, give me one of everything and I'll read through it. Some of it was good, but most of it really kind of sucked because it didn't really tell you what you needed to know. And clearly somebody had been paid on the government nickel to write how to start a dry cleaner, how to start a florist business, how to start But what they didn't tell you is like, well, okay, how do you get started when it doesn't fit this? And I explained to them that what I was going to probably want to do is be in the mail order business, which they kind of looked at me and said, whoa, we don't know about that. Also, they gave me this, go out and do a 3-year pro forma financial. And, it was a great form, interesting form. In fact, they probably should have it up on the website, up on websites or something, because it would probably help people out. But I'm going to tell you that's like step number 25 in actually doing this. Now, it's great if you can sit there and start at step 25, but we don't start at step 25. So that was kind of a storm of its own. Was a little disappointed. They also had retirees that were helping, that were ex-business executives. Had a discussion with a couple of those people because these were like free consultants. Not good. Not a lot of encouragement. A lot of, well, let me give you the 400 steps you need to do before you can even do a single transaction. I mean, talk about the discouragement for an eternity. Now, did they have some insights that I didn't have? Absolutely. Could they communicate those to me? Absolutely not. It was really sucked that way, and it was frustrating because if somebody has the ambition to wanting to start something, you got to figure out how to connect between the crazy dream and the reality that they're going to clash into and kind of make that fit and work. And I've worked with a lot of people who were going to start a business and talk them through what they needed to do and what they needed to learn. By the way, I got virtually none of that during this period of time. Then the next thing is, well, what licenses did I need? And of course, people would say, oh, you need to get some licensing. You need to get some things. Now, we were a partnership. By the way, I would not recommend a general partnership of any way, shape, or form. Limited partnerships, LLCs, different thing. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not giving you legal advice, but I'm just saying general partnerships are pretty dicey. Because, hey, unlimited liability, your partner can do whatever they want to do, which I found out later they will. They can, they will. So what licenses did I need? And that was in and of itself a rather interesting thing, which is I found out that I needed a resale license. And again, learning these lessons was painful. I mean, it wasn't like I had a check sheet. It wasn't like I had something that I could work my way through. I just had to go stumble forward and work my way chopping through the jungle of this maze. Much worse today, by the way. So, it was, I'm not trying to be too nostalgic, but I'm telling you, it was tough. So I went to get a license. I need to get a business license and a resale license. And I ran into, because of my age, I was 15 at the time, ran into a regulator, and I go in to get my resale license, my business license. And I'm sitting there and I said, I'd like to get a license. And that woman said, I don't know. How old are you? Now, I was already interested in the law. For those of you who don't know, I was always interested in potentially becoming a lawyer early in my career. Didn't end up going that direction. Variety of reasons why. That's a longer story, not going to be told here. So I said to her, well, I don't think there's a minimum age statute that says you have to be, a certain age, a certain height to ride this ride. I just want a license. He had to go get, and we'll just call him Mr. Smith. And Mr. Smith came out, and this guy was, clearly, again, when you're 15, everybody looks old. I mean, that's just a guy. This guy may have been 40. I don't know. But this guy came out, and he just had this quizzical look like, so is this like a school project? No, it's not a school project. I want to start a business. You want to start a business? I mean, well, you want to bring in your dad? No, I don't want to start my business with my dad. I want to start a business. And the guy said, well, I don't think we can give you a license. I said, show me the Colorado statute. I lived in Denver, Colorado. That's where I grew up. That tells me that I can't get a license. And the guy goes, hang on a second. He goes out and he calls somebody in legal and comes back and goes, well, he's right. There's no minimum age. Give him a license. And he said, you're a strange guy, man. You're a strange kid. Took that as a compliment. Always felt pretty good about that. So I got what I needed. I now had a resale license because I needed that to go talk to wholesalers. See, how I found out I needed a resale license is I walked into a wholesale house and said, I want to buy something. They said, we only sell wholesale. And I said, that's great because I only want to buy wholesale. And they said, well, great. Well, so where's your resale license? I said, what's a resale license? And I kind of looked at me and went, oh, what? This guy doesn't even know what that is. That's like, everybody knows that. Well, no, not everybody knows that. So now I have my resale license. I have the name of the company, have all that. But I need banking, because, it's not like you can walk around and just, peel off, bills and stuff. So I need banking. So my mother, and if you need banking, you need a venture capitalist. My mother stepped in as my venture capitalist and lent me $20 to get this thing started. I mean, imagine going to a bank today with $20. I mean, they just kind of laugh at you. Anyway, we went to South Colorado National Bank. She knew the bank manager, explained what was going on. Bank manager says, so this is a business with you and your husband and your son. No, it's my son's business. And believe it or not, having essentially a school ID and a bus pass, they gave me a bank account, which was pretty damn cool. And they told me, the guy said, hey, whatever you do, don't overdraft because we're going to come down hard on you. And I said, what's an overdraft? And he said, okay. Now, the guy was very patient, explained to me, because I think he understood that I was trying to step out and go do something. Now, for those of you who don't know the name, and there's probably a bunch of you, so I was looking for a name. Now, the interesting thing is once you decide you're going to be in business, then what's the name? And this is why we end up with all of these tongue twister or alphabet soup or something crazy thing. So what we did is I said, okay, I got to find a name. My partner was not helpful at this point in time. And, we're now back at the supermarket. And I'm looking for names that may be cool enough that we can pick up, something that we can go do, something that has some memorableness to it. And in one of the aisles was a whole bunch of shoe polish. And there was this company called the Kiwi Boot and Shoe Polish Company. So we did Kiwi Company. Turns out that, they didn't have Kiwi Company. Nobody was going to, and they, if we ever got bigger, I'm sure maybe they would have said something. They didn't know who we were. We didn't know who we were. So we called it Kiwi Company. And it actually worked pretty well because people would ask me, well, why Kiwi Company? And I go, well, it's a cool bird in New Zealand. And, now, backstory wasn't so great because the bird can't fly and some of that doesn't sound right. But anyway, here we were Kiwi Company. So that was great. So I made it through all those hurdles. I got my business license. I got my checking account, got my company name, find out what I need to do and all that. But then you actually get to the next level, which is, hey, you're in business. Now what? Now what are you going to do? Now it hit me pretty early on, which is, so what do we have to sell? We have to sell something. By the way, if you're ever in business and you don't know what you're going to sell, you're not really in business. That revelation, it just hit me early on. So what do we have to sell? Well, there's two things that we wanted to do. Well, number one is I wanted to be able to buy, because I was very much a bicyclist. I loved riding bikes. I rode bikes all the time. Didn't have a car, couldn't drive a car. And I rode everywhere, all over Colorado. I rode my 10-speed bike. Loved my bike. I mean, rode it in good weather, bad weather, terrible weather, all of that. Didn't matter. Rode. So we wanted to, I wanted to sell bicycles because I figured, bicycles are cool. Something I could believe in, something I had familiarity with. And most people really didn't have a clue. And there was this, especially in Colorado at the time, a resurgence or a surgingness in wanting to, buy better bicycles because, of course, we had gone through the, everybody had beach cruiser crappy bikes kind of thing, with coaster brakes and nonsense. So, racing, European racing bikes, which really kind of were a misnomer, but it sounded pretty cool. So I wanted to do that. And I had hung around bicycle shops and I went, God, I have to be able to do better than these guys because most of those guys sucked at selling. Most of those guys really weren't good at pitching what they were selling. Most of them were like, well, here's your bike, here's what it is, So anyway, bicycles. The other thing is sportswear, because I figure, if you're going to ride, you want to look cool, you want to look good, you might as well sell that. What I didn't know when I made that choice, really, was the fact that the margins on clothing were crazy good. Now, that's great because they have high perceived value and you can discount them and still make some serious money, and everybody's going to be happy. So we're going to be in sportswear. Perfect. Thing is that, where do you go to get sportswear? Luckily, I lived in Denver, Colorado. Denver, Colorado had a merchandise mart. Chicago had one, but Denver had a merchandise mart. And it was a huge mall type thing, but it was actually a bunch of little cubicles. And what it did is it had all of these different manufacturers who would have their sales office. And some of these were pretty small. Some of these were like, 8 feet by 10 feet. I mean, 80 square feet is not a lot of room to have a showroom. But I ended up, because I went out to Merchandise Mart, partner and I did a few times, went out there and I got myself a badge. I got myself a badge because I had what? I had a license and a resale license. And I said, hey, and of course, business cards. Still have some of the business cards, by the way. And bang, I'm now in Merchandise Mart. Now, the best part about it is that I'm walking the halls. And walking the halls, some people would talk to me, some people wouldn't. It's an entire building with all of these, it's like catacombs, but it's all filled with people who are salespeople. Now, some people were too busy to talk to me. Some people had their nose up in the air and and they were out of joint and all of that. But for the most part, people would talk to me, and I got a lot of training, and I got into the reality of brands. Now, as I went back, because I was still in high school, and I went back to my friends and wanted to find out, because that was, how do you do market survey? Live in a market. That's how you figure it out. So I found out, well, everybody wanted to buy jeans, and they want to buy jeans cheap. Now, talk about cheap in a second. So I thought, this is cool. Maybe I can get into jeans. Well, I got a real lesson in the reality of brands, and here's the short version of it. The guy at Levi's said, you want to be a Levi's what? You got to be kidding me, man. You got no money, you got no store, you got no stuff. Now, to his credit, and I don't know the guy's name, never really went back, but he gave me a tongue lashing, if you will, and really dressed me down in 15 minutes. Most people would have seen it as pretty negative, but he basically told me the lesson that I would learn later on about positioning, but he told it to me in the reality of the brands. Levi Strauss was the #1 jean brand. Hey, people in Moscow were doing all kinds of things. You could trade jeans for real cash, real money, trade it for, liquor, for drugs, for sex. This was big. And I knew that because, of course, my father was, we went to the Polish club and stuff and found out, that's a big deal in Eastern Europe. What I also learned, and this is the reality part, is that Levi's were looking for people who would buy $35,000 worth of jeans, $1973, as the initial order, and then set up monthly releases. And then you had to buy so many jeans every single month. Not me. We weren't going to be able to do that. I mean, hey, how would we even fit them in my, in a car, right? I mean, how do you do that? A little side story. It turned out that just down the block, like less than a half mile away from the Merchandise Mart, was a bus line. My mother had taken, having grown up in New York City, was expert at taking, transportation, taught, her kids how to do it. I knew how to take buses, and I could literally take the bus and walk to Merchandise Mart, which, of course, people at Merchandise Mart were blown away. Like, they say, well, hey, where's your car? Well, I don't have my car with me. That was always my story because I ended up taking the bus. And oftentimes these guys would feel bad for me. They'd say, well, I can't take you all the way home, but I can, save you a couple of transfers, and got to know people that way. So I got the reality of brands. I found out that, the top dog ain't going to sell to just anybody. They don't have to. They get to pick all the way down to the lowest of lows. Also, I ended up running into this company called Blue Ribbon Sports, and they were selling shoes. Now, I never sold shoes. The problem with shoes that I always saw, biggest problem with shoes, even though I wanted to, I really was interested. I met the Puma distributor, I met the Adidas guy, and I met Blue Ribbon Sports, which is Nike. And I tell you, that was looking really cool, except nobody has the right damn size for the foot that's in front of you. It's just a reality. It's Murphy's rule of feet. You know, you got an 11, the guy need 11 and a half. You got a 12, they need a 10. I mean, it's just nuts. Always the wrong size. Never got pulled into that. So ended up buying these things called Kensington shirts. Really a weird patchwork of shirts, kind of a quirky thing. But I had seen them at the May Company, and they were selling like crazy. And I knew that because by this point in time, I now started to talk to people inside of department stores, asking them what was moving or what wasn't moving, or how this was going to go, or what was going to take place. So I started buying Kensington shirts, and I would sell them essentially. Now you want to talk about, belly button to belly button, chin to chin. I was selling shirts to people, kind of across the aisle thing. Now that's kind of, my entry into this whole thing. And I learned a lot. Now, one of the things I learned is that there were all these layers to the wholesale world. And in some cases, and this is something that people have a hard time grasping today because that has collapsed for the most part. If you go to a Costco, if you go to a Sam's Club, you are in all likelihood paying wholesale or less, even though you may just take that for granted, for many, many items, because of course, even though it's limited selection, but you are getting pricing that smaller retailers couldn't even think about it. And when I realized that there were 7 layers of, wholesale, I mean, wow, you talk about trying to understand and put that in your head and work it around. That was just an amazing thing. Now, that actually opened up my eyes about what I could and couldn't do, but there you go. Now, that brings us to one of the things that happened, which was I ended up going into a wholesale place, which I would end up getting my first job. And that 50th anniversary is still a couple months away. But what I discovered is I discovered that I needed to be in the right level, the right layer, and looking for the right products and what you needed to do. So I'm going to share with you some myths that I've learned over the course of time. But before I do, I'm going to tell you a little bit about why. And this is people, by the way, early on, because of my approach to things, not 50 years ago, but pretty early on, said, John, you ought to write a book. Well, eventually I did write a book. And the book I ended up writing with my co-conspirator, Gabe Batista, was most businesses fail in the first 5 minutes. It just takes them 3 to 5 years to realize it, position to win. Now, you can get this book at Amazon. You can get this at Barnes & Noble Books a Million physically. You can also get it digitally with Kindle, Apple Books, and Nook. You can also get it at positiontowinbook.com. But I can tell you that this book, many of the lessons that I started to learn and catalog and pick up were because of that fateful days when I was trying to learn this the hard way with the shoe leather way. Most people never went through that. Most people never experienced it, including the partner that fell apart. That's for a different day, but it fell apart. Why would it be any other way? But the thing is that I learned a lot. So what did I learn? What were some of the myths that didn't turn out to be true? First off, the biggest one is this idiotic idea that if you build it, this is the inventor thing, if you build it, they will come. Later on, Kevin Costner used it in a movie about, building a baseball diamond in a cornfield. Bullshit. Ain't nobody gonna come. The world isn't gonna beat a path to your door. Build a better mousetrap and the world beat a path to your door. They get distracted. They stop off for pizza, go get some beer, end up not getting to you. Build it and they will come. Build a better mousetrap and the world's gonna be. No, doesn't happen that way. No matter what somebody tries to explain it to you or wants you to believe it. All of the mythology that actually ever worked, ever. Well, I'm gonna tell you why that's not the case. So I learned that one the hard way. We ended up buying some things. I ended up buying some things, and remember, I was bootstrapping off of $20. I didn't have a lot of dough that I could work off of. The next myth that is out there is that, you don't need to know how to sell. If you cannot sell, if you cannot advocate your position, if you cannot convince somebody that they need to go and move from wherever they are here to where you are and buy what you're going to sell, you will fail. Whether you want to believe it or not, whether anybody wants to say that, whether somebody will come up with some kooky example to, disprove me and say, John, well, you're just full of it. Here you go. Yeah, but if you dig in on the story, somewhere in there, someplace, somebody actually got off their ass and sold something. The next thing is that expectations are easy to control. Now, this is not something that I learned to articulate the way I'm saying it now, but it turns out to be the case. We think we can control somebody's expectations relatively easily. In a world of ever-expanding choices, options, and capabilities, we have a tendency, and this was true 50 years ago, and it's even more true today, we have a tendency to say, I don't necessarily want to buy what I'm buying today. I want to buy the next thing and the next thing. Get it into your head that if your story today isn't good enough for you to sell, then you're gonna have a problem. You need to just get your head wrapped around that you have to have a story that you accept. I've got a great story. You need to buy this great story. This is the great story. Selling futures, which is what I saw a lot of people in high tech do when I got into high tech. And remember, I'm so many light years away from high tech in '73. It's not even funny. I just couldn't believe it. People wanted to sell something they didn't have. Setting false expectations, disaster. Don't do it. The next thing is discounting. Discounting is absolutely a race to the bottom. If, in fact, you are in a price-sensitive market, you're in a place where people are always demanding and wanting discounts, you have to carefully craft how those discounts sound, how they come out. Does it mean I don't ever discount? No, it means that I organize the discount in such a way that when I deliver the pitch, when I put it all together, I eliminate this whole kooky concept that there's any kind of free lunch. They have to work for every discount. They have to work for every concession. They have to work for all of that. If you don't become good at that, it is a race to the bottom. Everyone out there would take something for free. When the internet was just blowing up, right, .com boom, there was a company that if you did a certain activity, they would send you a free cordless phone. Well, it wasn't free. It was basically $5. Cordless phone at that point in time cost $70. Do the simple math, subtract 5 from 70, you got $65 in plus stuff. Well, I used to buy them and would give them away for premiums to my coaching clients. The people who were doing it were stupid. They went broke. They did all kinds of things. I learned that lesson back in '73. Race to the bottom means you will go broke, and you will go broke in a very sad and sucky way. The next myth is that the prospects or customers, they want more friends. They want you to be their buddies. They want you to be their pals. That, you're going to get rapport and they're going to love you. And because they love you, they're going to go out of their way to give you the business, that they're going to become an easier sell. Some of the hardest sells in the world are people that when they think that you're their friends, they want the friends and family discount and then more. And well, why aren't you letting me go to this? Why aren't you copying me? Why aren't you doing this? Right, because that's when you have broken what I call the glass pane between you and customers. Big freaking mistake. Let's finish with some powerful lessons. 3 powerful lessons. Business is built upon taking action. Repeatedly taking action. Repeatedly taking action. Repeatedly. When I decided that I was going to talk about business, when I was going to write about business, when I was going to develop ideas about business, when I was going to put that in place, I had the money at the time, still have it, but I had the money at the time that I could go out and hire people to help me get that leg up. I wasn't like I was with $20. So I hired people. And at one point in time, when I got into this whole speaking info, whatever you want to call this, and I would have people tell me all of these kind of interesting things. And you know what I found out? That I lost about 18 months. I do a weekly sales meeting called Speed Start Monday. You can find it on my website and you can join it. It is for fee. There is no free version of it. There will never be a free version as long as I have something to do with it. If it is so good, you shouldn't have to give away for free. Well, John, you give away for free to get people who are going to get excited. I don't want free people. I want paying customers. So what I'm going to tell you is that it's built upon taking action repeatedly. And what is that action? Well, how about doing over 900 of them, doing it for 19 years, going out there and doing these things with consistency. Most of the time when I'm doing a turnaround and I'm working with businesses, somewhere in there was this disconnect, and the disconnect is that they weren't taking action repeatedly. You know what? Get off your ass today and go do something, and do something in a positive direction. Even if you don't think it makes any difference, you got to do that. Second thing is what I call the rat brain of business. All of business, every single business, there is not a single one that anybody can prove to me does not exist on this little three-sided nub. I know I'm asking you to take this, my words and translate this to geometrical shape, but it's a three-sided nub, and the giant rotating rock that sits on top of it, this big round rock that grinds away, rests on this nub, which I call the rat brain of business. And it goes like this. The rat brain of business is, number one, we take it from our shelf. Number two, we get it to their shelf. Number three, we get paid. When I heard the whole .com, whole crazy thing, when I heard all of these things where people say this, and they didn't have the get paid part, and they didn't have the get it onto their shelf part, you cannot violate the rat brain of business. So move it from our shelf to their shelf and get paid. 3 simple but essential steps. Do that, and you're going to find that your life is going to be a lot better. The next is that the better you can sell, the higher the probability of you not only surviving in business, because we have to survive in business, but in succeeding to the highest levels possible. If you cannot do that, you are not going to be successful. And that summarizes to this. Selling is at the core of every single successful business venture. Show me any single business that's out there. I don't care how you want to slice it. I don't care how you want to push it. I don't care how you want to talk about it. Selling is at the core of every single successful business. They like to doll it up. They like to paint around it. They like to stucco over it. But the reality is that somewhere, someplace, somebody's selling something to someone. So that's the most important thing. 50 years of being in business has taught me a very important long-term lesson. You need, and I'll finish with this, you need to have mental toughness, because every single day you're going to encounter, you're going to run into, you're going to see that there's issues and problems and obstacles and things that you have to overcome. And what you need to know is you need the mental toughness to know that no matter what happens, no matter how hard it's going to be, that you're going to make it through today, and that you're going to keep working at it, because success comes to those who fight through all of these adversities and come to the other side and win consistently. I wish you great success. I hope that you have as much fun as I've had in business. And I've had some great times, and I've had some traumatic times. And as I say it, there's always the good, the bad, and the ugly. But always remember, look for the good, look for the great, and make sure that you take action and don't ever quit. With that, have a great week, and we'll see you on the next Raging Verbalist.